Thank you so much. And I do have good news for you. I've now been discussing the issues with Rabbi Kahn so often and for so long, I already know the position he's going to take. And so we can have a chat with two rabbis with just one rabbi, as I can tell you what his interpretation of the passage might be. However, I thought it might be interesting for all of us to engage in a dialogue over the passage, as well as what's going on in the world today. So this is first and foremost a Torah study. And so we read the exciting, thrilling passage about Korach, which is one of the reasons why the Torah is the best-selling book. And if you go to a hotel room tonight and you check in and you look in the desk, you might see a Bible right there. And if you dust it off and open it up, you'll see the passage about Korach. And Korach, I'm going to be preaching about Korach on Friday night, but I will give you a little sneak preview. So Korach challenged the power of Moses, and he thought that Moses was usurping the power for himself. Now, this is considered to be a great evil, and he was condemned for it and paid the ultimate price. But if you think about it, a little while back in the story, another person said the same thing to Moses, more or less. Moses, you're taking too much on yourself. You shouldn't have all this power wrapped up in one person. That was his father-in-law, Jethro. But Jethro didn't say, you have too much power, give it to me. He said, you have too much power, share it with others in a democratic type of fashion. Don't usurp all the power for yourself. He didn't criticize Moses to gain power for himself. He did it for a good reason, a pure motive. And so he is regarded as praiseworthy. Korach, on the other hand, says to Moses, why do you have all this power? You don't deserve it. And so he says, give me the power. Why shouldn't I have power? Now, he was from the family of Levi, so he already had an exalted position. He was the assistant priest. And Moses said, you're part of the Jewish people. You're an assistant priest. Isn't that good enough for you? But it wasn't. And so he complained. So Moses then issued a challenge. So he said, okay, let's see if I'm actually speaking the truth, if I'm actually the chosen one that God wants to lead, or if he wants you to lead. So show up tomorrow at high noon and bring your fire pans with you, you and all of your people, and I'll show up and let's see what happens. So at the appointed time, Moses seems to feel a little bit of remorse. It's like, even though this guy's a thorn in his side and challenging him, he still feels kind of bad for him. So he says again to Korach, I don't think you really want to do this. You might want to just be content with the power of the assistant priesthood. Are you sure you want to go through with this? And Korach is absolutely defiant and says, you have no right to usurp all this power for yourself. So then Moses says, all right, I'll tell you what. You stand over there by your tent, and anyone who agrees with Korach, you go over with him. But if you're on the side, on my side and with God, then you come over here with me. And then we'll see what happens. So Korach, you would think he would see the writing on the wall right now. It's not looking too good for him, but he's stubborn. And so he goes over on his side, and he's got the fire pans with him, which is some kind of sacrifice. And God renders judgment. First Moses says to everybody, okay, guys, this is a test. If these people die a natural death, then you'll know that I'm not really the right one, and God's not with me. But if they die in some kind of weird way, some kind of unnatural way, some kind of like supernatural way, then you know that something's going on here. So just as he's finishing talking, the earth opens up and swallows them up alive into what they call Sheol, one of the very, very few references in the Torah to an afterlife. Sheol is the underworld, literally. So they get swallowed up. And then, that's not good enough. Then a fire breaks out and consumes a whole bunch of people. Like the people that are with Korach, his immediate entourage, friends, family who are with him, they're gone. But then something else happens. The people who are right next to him are consumed in the fire. But there's some other people who are kind of wishy-washy. They're not really on his side so much. They're not really on Moses' side. They're kind of like hedging their bet. They're not really sure. So they're kind of close to him, but they're not all the way with him. A plague breaks out. And all of those people who refuse to take a stand in the middle, they're consumed by a plague. Thousands and thousands die. And then Moses intervenes on their behalf, and the plague ends. What does that mean for us? Well, you could take it literally and say, oh my gosh, this is incredible. God must be with Moses. He must be against Korach. And look at that. God really does intervene. There's no doubt about it. The God of the Bible is true because nobody could have done something like that. That can't be a coincidence. Moses was proven right. Or you could say, well, it's a story that didn't really happen, but they're trying to tell us something. What are they trying to tell us? That when people are doing really bad stuff, if you hang out with them and you're cozying up to them, bad things are going to happen to you. But not just that. If you try to play it safe and you're in the middle somewhere and you refuse to take a stand, then also something bad is going to happen. The one who best said that probably was Elie Wiesel. He said that we must always take sides. And if you don't take a side, then you're supporting evil. And he, of course, is the Nobel Prize winning Holocaust survivor. So the moral of the story is, as my dad used to preach it back in the good old days, my dad didn't think that this actually occurred, but he did think that there were people who were brilliant writers who were describing lessons that we can learn from. You have to take sides. You must distance yourself from evil, and you shouldn't seek power. Now, since then, I've come up with a little wordplay of my own, which I'll also share on Shabbat. Don't worry, Sharon, I should have that finished by tonight, hopefully. And that is this. In Hebrew, the word for power is koach. Harris, you've probably heard that, right? Or koyach, as they say in Yiddish. Koach, if you know any Yiddish, koach means power. So Korach, his name is very similar to Koach. So Korach wanted koach. He wanted power. But instead of just power, there's also a resh. There's an R in the name Korach, in addition to the power. What does the R stand for? Well, you could say it stands for Ra'ah, or Ra, which is evil, or Rasha, which is wicked, like the wicked son. Or it could stand for Rekam, which means emptiness or vacuous. You just want power for the sake of having power. And so these different things added to power produce evil. But the other word that starts with resh is ratzon. Ratzon means desire. When your desire is not for goodness, but just for power, when you want to have power not to do good things, but just to acquire power for yourself, then the results are disastrous. And you literally get consumed, as these people are consumed in fire. And it becomes a plague. As a plague, this lust for power contaminates everything within its reach. And that's really the lesson of Korach, and a little play on words with koach, which is a good thing, which power is a good thing used properly. When it's used to feed someone's desire, it's a bad thing. That's pretty much what's in this Torah passage. There's some other incidentals, but the highlight of this Torah passage is Korach. And if anyone has anything they'd like, oh, now if you were talking to Rabbi Khan, I hesitate to do this, but Rabbi Khan would probably say, and he can correct me next time if he'd want, this story absolutely happened. It really did happen, and it was a beautiful test case, and it proves that God does intervene and that he made himself known. And the moral lessons that I was sharing with you, he would probably readily endorse. Because every week, every Friday night, we tend to agree on the moral lessons of the Torah and what the spiritual values are that we're sharing. We part company where he says it actually happened and I said it didn't. So we're both rather predictable. So you could probably have predicted my take on it, and also Rabbi Khan. But you never know. So when he's back next time, I'm going to ask him and see if I accurately predicted what his views on this passage would be. And now I'd like to open it up for other people. And then after this, we'll share some thoughts about what's going on in the world today. Anybody have any thoughts that they would want to share?
So my question is, you said that the earth opened up and consumed Korach and the people around him.
Yeah.
Okay. But there was a lot of people around them. So didn't they get sucked into the earth? Why did they need the fire too?
Well, God was trying to really make sure that people knew that he meant business. And also he wanted to make sure that nobody thought, well, this is just some kind of weird coincidence. He wanted to show, no, this is me talking. So first there were 250 people in his company. And these guys all got swallowed up. They were gone. And then there were another group of people who were in his immediate vicinity. They were consumed by fire with the fire pants. And then the plague broke out. Now, if you notice, I did something that's very uncharacteristic. I didn't apply this to the obvious of what's going on in the world today. So I'm not going to mention any names, which is also uncharacteristic. I'll just leave it to everyone who's here or maybe listening in the future, if they listen to this recording. Who is it that has this insane lust for power, and it's all consuming, and it's spreading like a contagion across the land and causing other people to do really horrible things and to subvert what we value most in the United States? And who is it that's challenging what our flag represents on Flag Day of democracy? And who is it that's knocking on the door and threatening to topple our democracy? I won't mention anything, but you probably don't have to think too much to figure out who that could possibly be, and who's getting a little too close and might get scorched or buried under and never heard from again, or contaminated with the plagues of ignorance and intolerance and indifference. But this story repeats itself throughout history. People who have this lust for power, it's all consuming, and it spreads, and it causes all types of destruction. So that's all I really have to say about Korach. He stood right on the abyss, on the edge of the abyss. And there's many people who believe in the United States today, we're on the edge of the abyss also. And we're at an inflection point where we have to decide, which side are we going to go with? Are we going to do the right thing, or not say anything, or try to be in the middle? Where are we going? So that's Korach. The other thing is that there's a lot of stuff going on in the world today. I will mention something as someone who I've served on the front lines of the abortion fight for a very, very long time. I actually wrote a Jewish Journal article for Father's Day. And in this article, I mentioned this high school senior Her name escapes me now. Someone will probably remember it. She's from Texas. She was the valedictorian, and she gave a valedictorian speech in which she challenged and rebuked the Texas lawmakers who passed a law that virtually made abortion illegal in Texas. It's called a fetal heartbeat bill. So it says that once the fetus develops a heartbeat, you lose your right to abortion. And a lot of women don't know they're pregnant by the time that happens. So by the time they know they're pregnant, there's already been a fetal heartbeat, so it's too late. So basically, you can't get an abortion. So she was toying with what she should do. She was very nervous about it. And she thought, this is going to get a lot of people really, really mad. But she felt compelled to say it. And so she said, you're messing with my future. You're messing with my rights. You're going to cause trouble all over the state by doing this. And I'm really disappointed that you would pass this horrible law. She was wondering what would happen. So she got a very favorable response at the event itself. She was pleasantly surprised that she received a lot of positive reinforcement for that. I suspect there were people who didn't agree with her, but maybe they thought, well, even if I disagree, she's got guts. I'll give her credit for that. But anyway, got a lot of. Then she got huge amounts of fan mail. Millions of people supported her, including some very famous people that contacted her and said, right on, we support you. But she said something interesting, which I incorporated into my Father's Day message in the Jewish Journal, which will come out a couple of days before Father's Day. She said, yeah, I heard from Hillary Clinton and I heard from, I don't know, Oprah or whoever. She said, but what meant the most to me, I heard from fathers who said, thank you for speaking out on behalf of my daughter, because I want my daughter to be able to have a future and to have control over her future. And the fathers thanked her, which she said was even more important than all the famous people. And I thought that was interesting on Father's Day, that she really received that kind of positive reinforcement. A lot of people think that this struggle for abortion rights is it's a female issue, and that women are the ones who are driving it. And obviously women are the ones who are directly impacted by it. However, a lot of other people are indirectly impacted, and it's very, very important to them. Anyone who loves their children, loves their sisters, loves their wives, loves other people, is interested in making sure that women have the right to exercise the right to choose. So I've been battling this issue for a very long time. And so I really thought it was remarkable what she did. And I give her full credit for having the courage to speak out. The other thing that's going on right now that's very interesting is, of course, in Israel. And I know that Harris is following this, and I'm sure everybody is. This is a very interesting situation right now because the reign of Netanyahu seems to be coming to an end. I think he's been vilified unfairly. I think that if you are running Israel and every day you're in a battle for survival and fighting for your life, you can be excused some excesses, which we in the United States think, well, you probably shouldn't have done this, or that's a little excessive. I mean, the guy has the awesome responsibility of protecting the Jewish state that hasn't been around for 2,000 years. And now we have a Jewish state, and we better do everything we can to keep Israel safe and secure. So I don't agree with all of the things that he does, but I certainly will cut him some slack and not make all these accusations that some people have and vilify him. I don't. I have respect for him. Even if I don't agree with everything he does, the guy is protecting the state of Israel. He's doing it the way he thinks necessary. And we do need a very, very strong leader in Israel. Having said all of that, if he is replaced by someone else someone who's able to reach out to the other side, I will be thrilled with that. And I will be ecstatic. I don't agree with some of the people that think, oh, these other people, these leftists, they're naive. They don't know what they're doing. They're going to end up destroying Israel because they don't get it. I don't agree with that. Anybody, all of these people in Israel who are running political parties, they are, I believe, are fully aware of what the risks are, and they understand that making peace is the best way to ensure Israel's security, that a constant state of war is the greatest threat to Israel. If Israel's always in war and conflict, the Arabs have fought many, many wars against them. And all they have to do is win one of them, and there's no Israel. And in a nuclear age where people are getting their hands on scarier and scarier weapons, we need to have peace, otherwise Israel's future is in danger. And the greatest advance towards that happened under the Trump administration with these peace treaties that are being made with Israel and her neighbors. And I hope that continues. And I hope all of us will encourage the new administration to try to make that continue and get more and more allies. Because the more allies Israel has in the Arab world, the more secure she is, and the less we'll have to worry about Israel's being driven into the sea. That's all I had to say on that. I suppose someone might agree or disagree with any of that, so I open up the floor again to see if anyone would like to share some thoughts on these or other issues.
Go ahead, Joel.
The girl's name is Wendy Murphy.
Wendy Murphy?
Yeah, Wendy Murphy. You can look it up.
Okay.
Anyways, this is a good reason to get rid of the filibuster. It get rid of something that's obstructionist, and one-sided on the basis that if we get rid of the filibuster, people that were elected, majority, will rule. And it's always been majority rule. When you have a normal election, it's who has the most votes. And in the filibuster, it makes it very difficult with the 60 votes in the Senate to get certain things passed by the majority. And it's a good reason to get rid of the filibuster. It's actually there as a brick wall. It could be 70, it could be 80. You know, it doesn't matter how many votes you get. It doesn't matter what your thoughts are. You're not going to get anywhere. And the filibuster has to go. And if it doesn't go, it's going to continue on like this. What we've had for the last 12 years, which has been over 8 years with Obama, and now going into 4 years with Biden, where the majority cannot rule. The majority of the people that want things happening aren't going to happen. And a good example of that is with Manchin. I'm mentioning this from the basis that almost 75% of the people in his state are for those bills that are to be passed, for most of those bills. And yet he is standing out there as an obstructionist in the Democratic Party. I don't understand. I can't understand it. I think he should become a Republican, because I think that's what he really is, or he should at least be an independent and vote for what his constituents want. And it goes back to the situation is where we need the fire and brimstone now. We need God to sweep down and and those people that are obstructing the growth of this country and the democracy, as you talked about. Something has to happen, and it can't happen the way it is now.
Go ahead, Emily. Unmute yourself.
Joel, I agree with you. We cannot go on like this. I was listening to John Kasich the other day on Bill Maher. I don't know if anybody else had heard him, but his feeling, and I kind of share this, and I've said it, his feeling is that we need a third party, that this business of our country existing with two political parties that are becoming more and more polarized is just not working. Having a third party that would glean the moderates from each part would force negotiation and more things actually getting done. So I just throw that out. I like Kasich, and he had some good things to say.
All right. Anybody else?
Go ahead, Paul.
Okay, I'm just going to go back to the Parsha this week because I was thinking about it, was reading something. How much of this piece do you think is an insertion into the Torah by the followers of Ezekiel after the return from Babylon to justify the reassertion of power by the followers as Zadok, to force to make the Levites subservient again? Because when the Babylonians took away all the priests and all the high and mighty and left all the peasants in Judea, these guys, like had a different kind of, and then the high and mighty come back and want to establish power on the new temple. And there are indications clearly that, it's the old story about the winners write history, and rewrite history. And I think there's a little bit of going on here. If you know a little bit about that dynamic between the people that were returning from Babylon versus those who had stayed. So, your point.
You raise a very, very interesting point. Part of a bigger picture in that in ancient times in the Jewish religion, there were competing interests, powers, like we have today. We have a legislative and a judiciary and the executive, and they compete with each other. And at certain times, one tries to usurp the other. In ancient days, there were the Kohanim, the priests, and you see them still today. I'm a priest. I have the power to issue blessings and things. Then you have the Levites, the assistant priests, and sometimes they got a little jealous. Hey, how come I'm the assistant? And they wanted to get a little more power. And then you have the prophets. The prophets took on the kings and rebuked the kings and said, you guys might be the political authority. We speak for God. We're over you. We have the power over you because we have a direct conduit to God. Then you had the monarchy, which believed that they should be the ones who are in power. And then you had the average Jewish people. And then you had people who are like prophets that weren't recognized by the establishment. They were like crying out in the wilderness. So you had all these different people. Now the Torah was written by different people who had a different power that they wanted to curry favor with, or it was actually written by those people. It was written by people who maybe they were writing for the priestly class, or from the Levite class, or they were part of the monarchy, or they were writing the words of prophets. And so the Torah can be seen as a clash. You can see it throughout the Torah. They're saying you shouldn't have a king. Kings are bad news. You don't want these people. They're going to be arrogant and drunk with power. And then other times they're going after the prophets and saying the prophets, these are false prophets. You can't really believe what they're saying. So you get all this kind of stuff in the Torah, and you're exactly right, Paul. These stories, somebody could have concocted a story against the Levites to show that the prophetic mission of Moses was more authentic than the Levites, to put them down in their place. And so that very well could be the origin or the basis of this story. And you see it throughout the Torah, all these types of things.
So how would Rabbi Khan answer that, Rabbi?
Well, he would probably acknowledge that there was a power struggle going on, but he would say that it was real, that this story really happened because these people were trying to usurp the power, and God showed where his allegiance was. But we do know also that Moses was constantly being challenged. I mean, every other Sedra, somebody's challenging Moses and complaining, and he's falling on his face and he's crying out to God, like, why do you have me lead all these people? What did I do to deserve this? Sometimes he's very melodramatic. Just strike me dead now because I don't want to deal with all this. It's like, it's pretty amusing, but that's probably how he would describe it.
But the issue of the our interpretation that we're fed about the Babylonian captivity is distorted. We have this vision, or at least until you look into it, that all Jews went to Babylon, which is not true. It was the elite, it was the priests, it was, people of wealth, the kings and stuff, and they left the peasants to run to be peasants and grow grain. And when they came back, the country, they wanted to reestablish it.
Well, what historians think happened is that the Babylonians came in and they laid waste. Apparently, Judea fought against Babylon, and they formed alliances, and they were fighting against Babylon, and they came out on the losing end. And when you challenge a world power and lose, it's ugly. So Babylonians came in, they destroyed the temple, butchered many people, and then carried off people into exile into Babylon. Okay, so the Babylonians didn't actually start picking and choosing, okay, we're going to take all the rich people. They just carried people off to serve as slaves into Babylon. But what happened was, historians believe, when the Jews got to Babylon, Babylon was a world power. It was like if you were conquered and you were living in Nicaragua, and then all of a sudden you're transported into the United States, you would become better educated, you would become part of a world civilization, and the people left behind were in a backwater. So the people who were left behind in Judea, because the Babylonians couldn't take everybody, they weren't all that efficient. They didn't have like Nazi-like efficiency where they could murder everybody. So the people who were left behind were living in a backwater. Jerusalem was laid waste. The place was not part of the world dominant community. They were not well versed. And so the people who were there were poor and impoverished, and nothing was really going on. The Jews who went to Babylonia in the second and third and fourth generation, they started rising up to the top. They were educated, and some of them became rather successful and well educated. And so then when they came back, the next empire around was the Persians. When they came back under Persian rule and were allowed to go back, they were the elites, and they wanted to rule over Judea. And so they posited that the prophets were the ones who really had their act together because they had a prophetic mission in Babylon. And so they tended to look towards them, not towards the temple, because the temple was decimated. So there's a lot of power struggles going on at that time. But it's really fascinating if you read Jewish history, and then you read the Torah through that lens, you can kind of see where it's coming from. Rabbi Kahn wouldn't necessarily interpret it in that way. He would interpret it more, well, this is actually what happened. Not this is somebody making up a story to try to make it look like their particular group is the legitimate power in Israel. Anybody else want to share some thoughts about this or anything else?
Aris, do you want to, anything about Israel or anything?
No, they haven't decided the election yet. So it looks like Netanyahu is going to lose, but there's no winner yet. So we just have to keep waiting. But I had an interesting thing happen to me today.
Yeah.
The bank called me to renew a CD, and I rushed to the bank, and the CD rate was 0.02, which is 0.2%.
Yeah.
And we need the rates to go back up. The rates are too low. People have their money in the banks, they're getting garnished.
Yeah, that's true.
So let's say a baruch that the rates go back up.
Yeah. Harris is our resident expert on Israel and on investments.
Go ahead.
So,
Okay, well,
Mishka,
All
you
right,
want
so
to speak?
I have a
Valerie and
question.
Mishka, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I have a question for the rabbi.
Yeah.
The 25th Amendment, I noticed in one of your presentations, you had a plaque hanging on the wall, 25th Amendment. You remember that?
Oh, yeah. You have a good memory.
Thank you. Do you think that the 25th Amendment will come into play where Biden, after a few years, will decide to retire? You know, he could retire on his own, or the Democratic bigwigs could get together and say he can no longer serve, so that Biden will get credit for having done something that nobody else has been able to do, have a woman president in the United States.
Interesting. So why do you think that the Democrats would want him to retire? Because you think because he's so old that they would want him?
No, I don't, well, age may have a little bit to do with it, but he is not the person that the Democratic Party believes he could have another term. So.
Because they think he's not the best leader. They think they could do better.
But they want Biden to get the credit for having done what nobody else could do, have a woman president.
Yeah, well, actually, I think you raise a good point. There's a lot of folks, especially in the Democratic Party, that would love to see a woman president. And so Kamala Harris would be the natural successor. So there might be some who would think after he serves this term that it might be a good idea for him to turn the reins over to her, and that might be a good thing. Some of them might think, well, maybe you should try to win a second term and then turn it over to her. But I see your point. But the 25th Amendment is that's a way of not allowing the term to come to a natural conclusion. It's by forcing the person out before the term's over because there's something deficient about the guy. So I don't think the Democrats, I'm pretty sure, they would never suggest that Biden is not fit and he should be removed from office. I think if they wanted that to happen, they would wait until the term is naturally over and then maybe see if he could be convinced to let Kamala take over. Now, the Republicans, on the other hand, they might very well say the guy's incompetent, he's inept, he's this, he's that, and maybe they would try to invoke the 25th Amendment. I don't know, but I don't think the Democrats would do that. I don't think so. But you have a very good memory, because I had that when Trump was doing some of his antics. So I was saying we should invoke that. And I did receive quite a bit of flack from people saying, you have no business putting that in the background during a Shabbat celebration. And it was kind of like my covert, not so subtle way of sending a subliminal message out there. But I don't think that I don't think the Democrats would do that. But I do agree with what's been said tonight, that we're in a very, very, very polarized situation, and it's very unhealthy, and it's very, very toxic. And I think the way to get around that is by having rational discourse, which doesn't happen too often. And I don't know about you guys, I'm a news junkie, but I'm watching MSNBC, and I see everything being presented from this point of view. Sometimes they do like keep themselves honest, and you hear some contrary points of view, but not too often. And then I watch Fox, and then it's the opposite point of view. And sometimes they have somebody who's a little bit contrary, but I would love to see them and everybody get together and just have rational discussion, and then see where we come out. And that's what we try to do here. Unfortunately, Rabbi Kahn wasn't here, but that's what we try to do here, have a forum where people can express points of view on all different sides. And I appreciate everybody being here tonight to help make that happen. Is there anybody else who would like to weigh in on this?
I was just going to ask you, Rabbi, if you ever watch PBS News and what you think of that.
Yeah, I do watch that. They're a little too erudite for me, I guess. Yeah, they're like just the facts, you know. But no, they're good. They're good. I don't watch them too often, but they're good. I watch CNN. I do watch Fox a lot, and I do watch. I listen to the conservative media a lot because I think it's very important for us to know what everybody's thinking. And I will tell you this: I do get a lot of, you know, I joke around and say, "Oh, I love Fox. I'm a fan of fiction," but I do get a lot of good information watching all segments. I get a lot of good information from Fox and from all the different news stations. And I encourage other people to do that too, to watch and also to talk to people who disagree. You know. Anybody else want to share some thoughts? If not, I will wrap it up and say I am sorry that we didn't get to hear from Rabbi Kahn. It is very nice of him to join with us on a weekly basis, and we're very fortunate to have his point of view being shared. And I thank everybody for participating in this, and I hope you'll spread the word, because we do absolutely need to talk to one another. We do need to speak to each other. I know that a lot of people have serious disagreements with what I have to say, and sometimes they agree with it. And the fact that we can all talk to each other is a very, very good thing. And it doesn't happen too often, but it does happen here. And I thank you for helping to make that happen. And I thank you, Sharon, for orchestrating all of this so that we could engage in this discussion. So thank you very much, everybody. It's been a pleasure. Let's, I'm still trying to do a rally for Israel across the board, and I'll keep you posted on that. I'm very interested in putting that together. And I thank you for joining us, and keep spreading the word. Take care, everybody.